Welcome back everybody to When the Dutch Went to Space, episode number 9, titled What a View. And what a view it is going to be. This is going to be a super exciting episode. I'm really anxious to share our progress. Before I show you the big thing, let's start off with Tonke A1, a Venus observer. So Tonke Dracht was an Indonesian-Dutch writer. I think she was born somewhere around, or she lived somewhere around 62. She was born before the Second World War, but I think her novels became more popular in this era. And she wrote a book called Torenhoog en Mijlenbreed. And it is a book about a researcher in a fictional landscape that visits the planet Venus. So that is what we are going to do. Launched on an NL3, you can see the probe with beautiful new solar power and, most importantly, an S-band transmitter. And yeah, we're getting ready for a insertion towards our sister planet. Of course, the Americans and Russians are competing to be there first, and I think Mariner 3 was the first one to do a flyby, or Mariner 2 was for Mariner 2 who did a flyby, and I think they will beat us to it, but you know, we've got a ton of science on board, and I know that Mariner 2 was a very, the spacecraft was a very lightweight, because they basically wanted to beat the Russians to it, and they successfully did. And you can see us position the spacecraft, trying to get it right, and the engine lights up finally. This is the beauty of this particular stage. It holds over 3,500 meters per second. And that is exactly what we are going to need if we want to make it all the way over to Venus. And there's about 500 meters per second in the satellite, which is way overdue, but hey, I didn't know that at the time, and we need a little push. So off she goes. Just admire that beautiful view. Oh yeah, and there's a thing, of course, with your engine and your antennas. So you have to be careful that you put the proper antennas on it, otherwise you will lose connection. On the 5th of September, we are launching an NL3B, and it's carrying Hayden satellites A and B, but it's the A1, so it's probably going to be A11. Or 11 and B. So these are the last two satellites that we're going to deploy to finish up our orbital network. You've seen me do this in the previous episodes. I launched them up into an elliptical orbit, quite high. Once we reach apogee, we have the Kruger stage that will circularize our operation, and then on the second orbit, the second satellite will ignite its engine and circularize, sort of putting them about 5 hours apart in a 10-hour orbit. And this gives us a very nice coverage. This is the second satellite zooming towards its apogee and getting ready to fire up its engine. And with 4 satellites moving in what I will call a double sign orbit. So what I mean by that, basically double sign, because that's what happens when you put 2 signs on an oscilloscope. You get this very interesting pattern which allows satellites to go up and down simultaneously and continuously, provide us with some very nice and hard needed coverage. Let's see if I can show you an image of the final orbits. Here we go. I hope this makes sense. Like 4 satellites, and yeah, good coverage. 26th of September, we have the Tonke A1 making a correction board of 5 meters per second. So the 500 meters per second which I packed is way too much. But perhaps we can change our course slightly after the flyby, and then if we can pick up a gravity assist, that would be awesome. Now, I typically build a backup for if the primary launch fails. So on the 4th of November we are launching Tonka A2, which is kind of awesome because I don't know if Tonka wrote a book about Mars or just about Venus, but here we go. The delta V for traveling to Mars is slightly higher, but remember I overpacked quite a bit. And the trans-Mars injection, I think it's about 4,000 liters per second. So we have more than enough delta V to make it happen. And just admire the beautiful waterfall plumes. This is sort of wrapping up my first series of programs, and I'm moving towards the next big program, which is going to be the moon. And we already had lunar impactors and orbiters in the previous episode, but I am really tempted to pick up the moon landers or crewed orbit. So one of the two is going up next, and you will see in a minute what I decided on. But first I can show you the 5th of December, which is Sinterklaas evening. And that's when we give presents, so we're launching the Chandra B2 moon orbiter. And you remember we already sent the moon orbiter up there, but we struggled a bit with the RCS to get a nice low orbit around the moon. I was happy enough to get a orbit around the moon, and this time we're spending more time tweaking the RCS very carefully, because if you run out of RCS you have a problem. So this one actually packing us slightly more RCS fuel to tweak the insertion stage, because you remember after we do the TLI we use the insertion stage to adjust our angles so that we're perfectly aligned for this capture burn, because the capture stage itself does not have RCS or control. It just has one big engine and needs to point in the proper direction in order to complete its capture burn. So Chandra B2 is doing a better job than P1. I really like how we managed to do all of this on a 2.6 tons of payload to lower Earth orbit. I mean, the last time I played RP-1, I think I had something like 6 to 10 tons. Might be enough to do alone. But the 16th of December, we're still in 62. Tonka A1 does the flyby of Venus, and this is the first flyby that we do of another planet with a with a spacecraft. So the 14th of December, like the first flyby happened in December 14, 1962. I had to look it up. Mariner 2 indeed zoomed by Venus 2 days prior to us. So that's really a bummer. We could have broken a record, but 2 days off. We are, however, in a much lower orbit, so we're almost practically touching the atmosphere. We have temperature meters, we have magnetometers, we bring in tons of data that they never did, like video. 29th of December, Kuifje A0. Kuifje, or Tintin in English, but I'll stick to the Dutch names. Kuifje A0 is a prototype spacecraft for manned space flight. Yeah, I've finally decided which program I'm gonna pick up. So the NL3B is more than capable of launching this. It's a simple service module that we're using. It's based on the Gamma engine. We're reusing tanks. I haven't researched or built or tooled everything yet. This is basically just a test of the re-entry capsule. Yeah, so the US started doing Mercury test flights in, I think, 1958. Those were mostly suborbital, so we're pushing it directly to orbit, which is already impressive, I guess. USSR started about 2 years later, and they launched Gagarin in 61. So we're well behind when it comes to manned space flights. We're testing the launch abort system, the service module, re-entry profile, how much G's it pulls on the craft. I'm looking at the aerodynamic profile, the power system, how to control the craft, if all the RCS systems are working, parachutes. And I really love this little capsule built by CNES. And in our universe, this means the French space agency co-created the capsule with us. And In return, we're of course going to onboard a French astronaut in due time. But looking at the screen, we can see the gentle spacecraft gliding back to Earth, tumbling and tumbling its way towards re-entry. This is the re-entry burn. This is definitely gonna work. This is basically a gamma engine, and we're using existing engines, ignitions, pressure vessels. So, yeah, there's no reason why it wouldn't work. You can spot perhaps all the nice decals that I made on the craft. Conformal Decals is a brilliant mod by, I forgot who actually made it, but you can look it up. Conformal Decals is a great mod. It's finally one of the first mods that works flawlessly when it comes to curved surfaces. I'm not sure how this was programmed, but it sort of detects the surface and then curves the image around it, which allows you to make really nice craft with all kinds of text and flags on it. So what we discovered is that the capsule re-enters nicely, but also reorients itself properly. And I put in a bit of a spin control because I still like spin stabilization. But that's worked out fine. Tonka A2 is also in need of a correction burn, this time 30 meters per second. So I'm really happy with the design, but yeah, a little bit overdone. With better ISP on the engines, we could maybe turn this into an orbiter. I have to check the delta V for it. Maybe we can bring a heat shield and do aero capture. I did this in the past, but usually things blew up. Anyway, it's the 16th of March, and KSP B1 is launching an animal. Yeah, so it's probably a monkey from the forests of Borneo, and I'm sure they have very smart primates over there. And we're also testing out the new service module that I unlocked in the launch escape system. And they need to be tested extensively, so we don't want our astronauts to run risk. This is where you see me test the loss and being very surprised that nothing happens. And it's not a staging error, it's a construction error, so I need to fix that. The service module has also been changed. It's now using the Viking service module from the KNES mod. I managed to get the RCS working, so you can see us test everything out. Yeah, pretty good. So we're basically trying the same angle and technologies that we already tested with our Corona satellites, and, weather satellites. So if we position the center of mass low enough, it should be self-orienting. And we're testing this out by putting the craft in a slightly different trajectory. So we see the tumble again, which is really inconvenient. I put the decoupler too deep into the capsule, which means that there's a force being enacted on it, and that makes it tumble. And you will see that this actually makes for a great test. So the question is, does the capsule reorient itself bottom first, or is it going head first? Because if it's going head first, it is going to burn up. Unfortunately for us and our smart primate friend on board, everything works fine. But I do think we need to upgrade. So on the 14th of April, we're doing a last test, a launch escape test. We can actually do this on a 2C booster. We don't need all the power from the 3C. So we want to see if the new system works. It has nothing to do with the 140 engineers that are idle in Launch Complex 2. Nothing at all. We don't want to use an expensive capsule, though. We are using a mass simulator.
Steht sie da und wartet auf den Start. ist schon wissenschaftliche Experimente, doch was nutzen die? Am Ende denkt sich Major Tom im Kontrollzentrum, der wird man panisch, der küsst die Kapsel, der stimmt ja gar nicht. Hallo Major Tom, können Sie hören, wollen Sie das Projekt denn so zerstören? Doch er kann nichts hören. Er schwebt weiter, völlig losgelöst von der Erde, schwebt das Raumschiff völlig schwerelos. Die Erde schimmert blau, sein letzter Funk kommt, grüßt mir meine Frau und er verstummt. Unten trauern noch die Egoisten, Major Tom denkt sich, wenn ihr wüssten, mich führt ihr ein Licht durch das All, das kennt ihr noch nicht. Ich komme bald, mir wird kalt. Völlig losgelöst von der Erde schwebt das Raumschiff schwerelos. Völlig losgelöst von der Erde schwebt das Raumschiff schwerelos. Völlig losgelöst von der Erde schwebt das Raumschiff völlig
What a flight! So, just before main engine cut off on the first stage, our ascent guidance computer went completely haywire and tried to point the nose towards the ground. And for a moment, ground control's finger hovered above the abort button. But Mike is safe today by manually correcting the pitch and maintaining a 60-second to apoapsis until she made orbit. So after 7 hours in a 220 by 160 kilometer orbit, she safely landed back on the very day that the US stopped with their Mercury program. We are in the race.